This episode is sponsored by Fantasy Flight Games. Episode 25 of the Board Game Geek podcast, where we geek out about board games, the mechanisms behind them, and the people who create them. I'm your host, Candice Harris, and I'm really super excited to be here today with my good friend Ryan from Man vs. Meeple. How's it going, Ryan?
Hey, everybody. So happy to be here and to finally be invited on, Candice. I'd love to take some time out of my day to talk to you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure, like when I get to bump into you at conventions, and that very first BGG con where we met and got to hang out, play games, eat barbecue together.
Oh yeah, don't remind me. I want that back so bad.
Are you going to BGG con this year?
You know, that's actually still up for debate because I am going to PAX. I recently started a new job in the industry. So,
cool.
So for those who don't know, I work for Japan Games now doing marketing and communications. And so that kind of does affect my convention schedule. I might need to be at specific shows. So I think I'm going to be at PAX Unplugged.
Oh, cool.
And it's so sad that those cons are so close together.
Yeah.
It makes it so hard to do both, but I would really like to do both.
Okay.
So we'll see.
We'll see.
Actually.
Gotcha. Wow. Congrats on the your new role with Japan Games.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That is awesome. And what else is new with you since Gen Con?
Well, post Gen Con, we at Man vs. Meeple have been kind of diving deep in all of our Gen Con releases, trying to get as much content made on as many games as possible. We've done a lot of live plays focusing on Gen Con content. We've been doing a series that we really like called Just Played, where we just play a game one time and then kind of talk about our very first impressions. And that's cool. That format has been a lot of fun and people seem to really like it. And so we're trying to knock out as many Gen Con releases as possible.
Cool. I'll be on the lookout for those because I know your video for Age of Innovation before Gen Con got me super duper hype for Age of Innovation. I was already excited about that game because I've always loved Terra Mystica, so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna buy that, But I watched that video the week before Gen Con, and I'm like, now I'm really excited to play this.
And those videos are not sponsored at all. So it's not like we're out there just trying to push a particular game, but we get a game like that, and I'm a big Terra Mystica fan too, so I was already very excited to play that. And I think you can tell when we're doing those kind of videos. It's just infectious when we really like a game. It's very difficult to hide how much you really love a particular game. And so I think it really came out when we were talking about that.
Totally. So every time for listeners out there, every time I reach out to a potential guest co-host about coming on, I would say 90% of the time will send them a handful of different topic ideas just to see if it something resonates with them, or if maybe it spins off into a different idea of something we can talk about on the episode. And for almost, this podcast has been on for almost a year now.
Congrats, by the way.
Oh, thank you. In most cases, one of the topic ideas I send people is about doing a designer spotlight where we talk about a game designer and, discuss some of our favorite games and what makes that game designer kind of special and, what's signature about their games. And we haven't done one yet until I emailed Ryan, and Ryan's favorite topic on the list that I sent him was the designer spotlight. And there was a particular designer that you wanted to spotlight.
That's true. You want me to go ahead and spoil it?
Yes, spoil it.
Well, first of all, I will say I do. I just I like giving credit to designers, and I like looking at a designer's catalog, right? There's just something special, I think, about watching how a designer's designs innovate over time. The designer that's very close to my heart, whose games I love, that's Vital Lacerda. No big surprise to people who watch the channel because we did our big top 50 games, and I had almost every one of his games appeared somewhere on my top 50, some higher than others, obviously. So I always jump at a chance to talk about Lacerda's games and also just to bring people into them, because I would love to see more people playing Lacerda's games and not just getting intimidated by hearing his name when it comes to a board
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, today we're talking about board games designed by Vital Lacerda, just kind of highlighting what makes them special, what makes them challenging, and of course we'll also kind of share some of our favorite Lacerda games.
Yes.
I will say up front, like, I have played a good chunk of Lacerda games, but I do not consider myself to be an expert by any means. But I was just very excited to have this conversation because I really appreciate Vital Lacerda as a game designer and his games. And I also was excited that you're so excited about his games. So I'm like, I want to talk to you about it. So here we are going to be talking about some Lacerda games. But
Absolutely.
But before we start talking about Lacerda games, I'd love to hear what you've been playing lately, Ryan. So let's jump into fresh plays.
All right, so the game, there's a lot. Gen Con just happened. We brought back so many games. And so when you're asking me, what have you played recently that stood out? I'm going back and actually talking about games that came out of Gen Con that I absolutely love, that I could play over and over again. The first one of those games is called Sky Team.
Yes.
This is from Luc Ramond and publisher Le Scorpion Masqué. This game is so much fun. It is a 2-player cooperative game where you're a pilot and co-pilot trying to land a plane, which sounds, like this is something they do every day. But it's a challenging dice placement game, and the real challenge is that you're not allowed to talk to the other player. Yeah, that it's a little bit off theme, but it makes the game so engaging because you're placing dice down to do a wide variety of things in order to make sure that you're safe to land. You have to make sure that you're coming in at the right approach speed. You have to make sure that you're signaling ahead to the tower and that the runway is clear of planes. You have to make sure that your plane's angle is flat. You have to make sure that all the brakes are up, that the flaps are down. There's all this stuff that you have to manage, and you're having to manage it all by placing dice down. And each player takes turns placing these dice, and in some cases you add up the total. Some places you look at the difference. Some places you kind of work cooperatively. And every kind of die has its own effect, and each player has their own tasks that they have to excel at or they have to complete. And it's super fun. It's very thematic, and it's also very difficult. And you can start adding on these modules. There's modules where you have to worry about how much fuel is left in the plane. There's certain airports where you have to approach at different angles. So you have to make sure that your plane is going through different angles at different times, which is very difficult to time. So there's a lot of really cool tension in this game. And I've played it 5 times now, and it's been a blast every single time I've played it.
Yeah, I have only played Sky Team once, but I'm going to tell you, I loved it. This is like one of 2 regrets that I didn't take home from Gen Con. And it was only because they kept running out, and our BGG review copy went to Eric Martin, because I think he's going to Eric. I think he's going to do a video on it. And also, we had some in the hot games room at Gen Con, which are going to the library, which I could have borrowed one, but I'm just going to buy it because I thought that was just such a fantastic game. I did a demo of it with a young kid, and his dad was kind of helping him a little bit. But it was just, even that first scenario, we ended up winning, but it was challenging the way it makes you think. And I love the dice placement, and I love the fact that there are all those different airports and everything, like you're saying, that, you could make it progressively more challenging and just vary it up a bit. So
and also,
that's cool.
I know this is a podcast, so you can't see anything I'm talking about, but definitely go look at pictures and just look at how the board looks, because the way that they've made that board kind of resemble the cockpit of an airplane, and it just looks it immediately draws you into the theme. Yeah,
great pick. I cannot wait to play more Sky Team. I agree. I think it's fantastic. And that's why it was one of the games that was selling out everything every day, every first morning,
Yep.
So I've been trying to play a lot because I was like kind of making up for lost time since I was sick after Gen Con. And there's so many games like you're saying that were like have been memorable and that I just like enjoyed that I want to talk about, but I'll talk about them more over time. But like, for example, for some reason, Nemesis popped up on my radar when I was at Gen Con, and I don't remember why. But I remember talking to Steph Hodge about it because I know she likes it a lot. And then she kind of like was telling me some stories and it got me excited about it. So one of the things, like when I was sick, I became sort of obsessed with Nemesis. And
nice.
Yeah, and I was just watching a lot of like solo playthroughs. I was watching rules videos. I ended up tracking down a copy, which I bought, and now I have it. And I have played the games, and I love it already. But I'm not talking about Nemesis. I could also, I'm not talking about Nemesis because I want to play it more, and at some point I'll talk more about it.
Yeah, get it because the new one is coming out kind of soon.
Yeah. So I'm getting in on that. I'm like I'm late to the party with Nemesis, but I'm getting in on that. But yeah, it kind of made me realize how much like I love these like kind of like semi-cooperative games where there's like maybe some backstabbing happening. That just excites me personally. Then I started Frosthaven, which the day that we had this hurricane in LA, our good friends Cassie and Jake came over and we started our campaign of Frosthaven. It was a very slow game because we were all like relearning the rules. We only had like a little bit of Jaws of the Lion experience. But anyway, like I said, I'll talk about that later down the line when we're a little bit like further through playing it, but fantastic time. Very excited about that. Then I also played Great Western Trail New Zealand recently.
Oh, I did too. It was so good.
It's so good. But I always gush about Great Western Trail on this podcast.
I love it.
So I was like, I'm not going to talk about that. And then the other thing that I'm not going to talk about is
there's a lot we're not talking about today.
Oh yeah, we're not talking about these things at all. But Gaia Project is on my mind. Yep. So like back in the day when I got into Terra Mystica, I had played Gaia Project only once. And I had kind of a wonky experience with it. I think the teach wasn't great. We didn't even finish the game. Like there were some weird things, but at the time I kind of remember just walking away being like, I like the theme of Terra Mystica better. So,
sure.
Just totally forgot about this game. Then, of course, the week before Gen Con, I played Terra Nova, which got me excited about Terra Mystica again. Got Age of Innovation. Love that. Got me even more excited. So I'm like, I need to try Gaia Project. So got Gaia Project to the table solo. And oh my goodness, it has not left my brain. I'm so excited about like kind of like getting into that now. Another one I'm late to the party with. But I'm not talking about Gaia Project, Ryan. Guess what I'm talking about?
Well, I can because you told me before we filmed, so I'm not gonna guess. But I don't think I would have ever. I can tell you, I would have never guessed this, nor that I would have never guessed that this type of game would really appeal to you. So maybe there's a side of you as a gamer that I just wasn't aware of before right now.
You're gonna learn that I love historical strategy games and war games, and I played. I guess I'm trying to think of the timing. Not last weekend, the weekend before. An epic game of Here I Stand, which is a 2006 release designed by Ed Beach from GMT Games, 2 to 6 player, like epic card-driven game that covers like the political and religious conflicts of the early 16th century Europe. And it's like basically a 6-way struggle for power and influence with these 6 different factions during the Protestant Reformation. There are... I've been so excited to play this game for so long because in my head, just from videos and reading about it, I'm like, this is historical TI4. And I love TI4. I love TI4. I love historical games. So I'm like, I want this experience. So I finally I scheduled this 2 months out. I got 6 people together. Including myself.
Oh, a full 6-player count.
Full 6-player count. Like, this is the way. I heard this is the way to play this game. This is the way. And now, after playing it, I am a believer that this is the way to play the game.
Set up a game and bring me in. I want to get in on this.
Yeah. I think you would love it, actually. Wait, are you a TI4 fan? Or do you like
I am a
big
big
epic games,
I love
asymmetric?
TI4. I love GMT games. I love coin games. So I feel like I can
Oh
find
my
a lot to love
goodness.
here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you are definitely going to like love this, but basically one player plays the Ottomans, one player plays the Habsburgs, one player's the English, another the French, another the papacy, that was me, and then another the Protestants. And first of all, let me just say how I decided. I was like, hey, I'm going to be the papacy, and I told two sets of friends who were playing this separately, and immediately both of them, or two people, were like, okay, that means I'm going to be the Protestants. Like, they just wanted to go head to head with me. And I was like, wow, friends, wow. But yeah, in the game, you have these like 6 like asymmetric factions, like each one, like you can automatically win this game if you get to 25 victory points. Boom, win the game. But otherwise, each faction kind of has their own way of that they can auto win the game. And also each faction has its own kind of like menu of actions, kind of like similar to a coin game in that sense. And the way it is with like these 6 different factions, the way they all like work together. First of all, this is like more of a political game, I would say, than a war game. Like there were battles that popped off, and there's like some dice chucking and everything. And I was battling my friend Drew, who's the Protestant player, which is kind of like, you know, there's dice rolling, so you got to be okay with that if you're going to play this game. But it's like I'm doing this like where I'm worried about the Protestants kind of taking over. The English and French are kind of concerned about each other. The Habsburgs are kind of like in the middle of everything. The Ottomans are doing all this like pirating different areas to kind of like meet their goals. And one of the coolest things about this game is that there is a diplomacy phase every round. And in our game, only one person had played this game before, and he played like a handful of times years ago. And the rest of us were all newbies. And so the first diplomacy phase, like especially if you're new, you know, is kind of like quick. Like you think of like blood on the clock tower. You get up and you go. You could talk to people. You can make some deals, because before you do the diplomacy phase, you get a hand of cards. So this is like a card-driven game, a la Twilight Struggle. So everybody is getting cards from the same deck, and you get a different amount of cards depending on like the progress of your faction. So when you get to this diplomacy phase, you can make deals to give people cards, and cards are like driving your action and fueling how much you can do each turn. So they're very important. Wow. So yeah, so I made some deal with my friend Ben, who is the English player, who was looking to get a divorce. Because as he said, he was playing the wifey game in this. But he needed to get a divorce, and he needed my permission. Like I had to okay it. So I had him give me, I think, 2 cards that round. And I was like, yeah, I'll give you the divorce. And, you know, we're having these side conversations.
Interesting.
Yeah. But
so then it's negotiation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can form like official alliances with people. So after you do this like diplomacy phase, you come back to the table, and everybody goes around the table announcing like the outcome. Like, hey, I'm in an alliance with the French. And then it would keep going around the table. And then the French player would have to, when it got to them, also say, I'm in an alliance with the papacy or whatever, or whoever I am. Sure. So you have to like validate, like they could backstab you and say, no, I'm not. Boy. Ha ha ha, you know.
Did you backstab anyone, Candice?
I did not. No, I'm not that kind of player.
No,
often.
You hold to your deals.
Yeah, I hold to my deals. But but by the time we hit the 3rd round diplomacy phase, it was so spicy, Ryan. Like,
I bet.
People that I would never expect to be talking and whispering to each other in the corner were whispering. And the outcome of this whole phase, like, and you're just like, okay, well, I can see this person might be set up to win, so we have to work together to stop that, you know. And it's like one of those games. But everybody's having these conversations, and I just remember my brain tingling so much from just the way the politics and the interaction was working at that point. Like it was like things are clicking, people are understanding how the game works. And then after that round, the Habsburgs, the player who was the most experienced, ended up coming out of that diplomacy phase, making deals with everyone. He had 11 cards. I don't know what he was telling people, but he came out with 11 cards where everybody else probably had 5 or less. And
Wow. So did he win?
He did. He did. And we were not
Uh-oh.
sure. We kept being like, we knew he was a threat because he just knew more about it, but we weren't sure how he could pull it off. And then all of a sudden we saw him taking different regions, because one of the ways you can get points to your auto victory is like taking over these key political spaces. And we were like, oh, okay, he's about to win. And like at that point,
Uh-oh.
I don't think there was anything we could do to stop him. So the game ended at like at the end of round 4, I would say. And I forget how many turns it can go to, maybe like 9 if it goes the full way.
Oh wow!
And it
so
was
about half the time.
Yeah, and I've heard like it can end early often, but you should kind of like plan a whole day for it.
How long was your game?
I want to say we got into it around like 1:00, and that probably was probably done by like 6:30 or 7.
So that was like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah,
and that you only experienced half the game.
Yeah. Like
wow.
This is like you have to plan a day for this game. I was expecting for it to go till like 11 p.m. That's
Wow, that's wild. I'd love that. I love that though.
So it was like it was cool that it ended early, especially like I like when that happens for a first game, because it's like it's kind of more of a learning game. Everybody got used to like seeing how different things work. Now I'm ready to come back and I want to try a different faction. And yeah. So anyway, it's called Here I Stand. Yeah, we should try to afford like at a convention together, especially like
just start the day early, come the day before, and just do a whole long day of it. That would be fun.
I would love it. And 6 players. But yeah, I can't wait to play that again. I also want to try Virgin Queen, which was like the kind of sequel to this game.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, Here I Stand, epic game. What else have you been playing lately, Ryan?
All right, well, the other one I wanted to talk about, because I again came from Gen Con, and this was my number 1 game of Gen Con, and spoiler alert, this might end up being one of my number 1 games of the year.
Ooh.
This is Barcelona from Danny Garcia and Board and Dice. This game is phenomenal in so many ways. I just want to start by saying that Danny Garcia, the designer, obviously has a lot of love for the city, because the design of this game and just like the thematic idea behind this game is all rooted in the actual history of the city. And what you're doing in the game, the actions you're taking, all have actual historical significance. So I didn't know any of this before I started playing the game, but I love when I walk out of a play and I feel like I learned something. And I learned like Barcelona was like one of the most defensible cities in Europe. And it had these giant walls, and like they had a law, like you could not build outside of them. So Barcelona just kept growing and kept growing inside these walls, and the population was starting to suffer because they couldn't fit. So they had this guy, Lacerda, who they brought in. They tore down the walls, and he kind of planned an expansion to Barcelona. And this is crazy.
Wow.
He kind of invented urbanism, or like the block system that we use today, where you lay down your roads in a grid and you build in the middle and you have all these like square routes. Like that was invented by him.
Wow, that's so cool.
And Barcelona was one of the first places to do that. And he was very forward thinking. He left room for streets to be wide enough because he foresaw things like trams coming. He foresaw like automobiles. He saw like that transportation was going to become so important. So he had these extra wide streets that let people like walk. Like, so he had sidewalks. Yeah. It's just crazy to me that this all came out of Barcelona. And so you're replicating this in a very neat way, that you have like this new section of Barcelona, and you're building buildings in there, and you're kind of taking workers out of a bag, and there's these different colored workers, and there's a whole system to the game where you place the workers down in an intersection of this city. And each intersection, like picture, a city street divided into blocks. You follow the street, like to the left and up, and then you see which actions you're in the middle of, and you get to take both actions. And then there's a diagonal that shoots through, so you can potentially put it in such a place that you get to take 3 actions. And this is one of those games where when you take an action, sometimes you get to place like a bonus tile that lets you take another action. So you're playing a turn where you might be taking 4 or 5 actions in a turn, building out Barcelona, getting in-game scoring tiles, moving your trams around the city, and ultimately building buildings. Because at the end of your turn, you look at all of the people that have been placed in all these different intersections, and you can remove them in order to place building tiles here. And again, this is super interesting because Lacerda had this plan for the city that every block was going to be, 2 sides of the block were going to be buildings, and the whole rest was going to be like parks and gardens and places for people to walk. Well, we know that isn't what happened because we see how our cities look. And so you can actually gain or lose favor with Lacerda throughout the game. If you build these like small level buildings in these grids that are just like 2 sides, you get points with him. He gives you favor. But you can build these giant apartment complexes effectively and just completely cover that space, which he doesn't like that. And you actually lose points with Lacerda. And every scoring phase, you get points for doing a specific thing multiplied by how high you are on that Lacerda track.
Oh, wow.
So
cool.
If you've been playing in such a way that you appease Lacerda, and it's such a satisfying puzzle to try to solve, to try to figure that out. And there's multiple scoring phases, and the way that scoring happens is very dynamic. So it's such a fun, satisfying game. It's one of those games where, your first turn, you might score like 5 or 6 points, but at the end of the game, you might be scoring like 30 or 40 points on a turn.
Wow.
Which I really like that
Nice.
ramped. Yeah, it hits all those like combo buttons for like a Euro gamer like myself who loves that. Like, oh, you do this, it lets you place a tile. The tile you covered gives you another action. You get to draw this thing from a bag. I drew a token, that's another action.
Yes.
Combo-rific. It's so good. And I think,
awesome.
they sold out at Gen Con too.
Yeah.
So hopefully people are out playing that. And if you haven't played that, you have to play that, Candice.
I have not played it yet.
Good.
Yeah, I actually, I think it was the last day of Gen Con, I stopped by Board and Dice's booth and talked to Rainer about it. And I was already kind of intrigued because, like you're saying, the designer, it's based on something that happened historically where he's from, and it just looks beautiful. It has a really nice table presence.
I didn't even mention that.
Yeah,
it looks phenomenal. And my favorite thing is in the rule book, actually, he kind of broke down. He's got little sidebars all throughout the rule book that said, look, this is how it actually happened. This thing that you're putting down, the way you're building the streets, they started building streets. They started
that's cool.
installing trams. I like having that historical background.
Yeah.
For what I'm actually doing in the game. Plus, I think it just makes the game easier to understand mechanically.
Oh, yes.
When they actually tell you thematically what you're doing as well.
Totally. That's really helpful. And that kind of makes sense now that I realize that you love coin games and GMT games and everything.
I do.
Because I love that in historical games too, where they're telling you, explaining a mechanism, and then they'll pop up a box hey, here's a designer note of why this is working this way.
Right.
But that's really cool. Yeah, I have not played Barcelona yet, but it's on my list to check it out, and I have a couple of friends locally who have played it, and one in particular really, really likes it. So I'm definitely curious about it, especially because just everything you just said.
It's just satisfying at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Really.
Cool. So that's Barcelona.
Yeah, Barcelona.
Oh, so the next game I'm going to tell you about is actually not something that's maybe traditionally in my wheelhouse, or I'm learning that it might not be my favorite mechanism, but a lot of people kind of love it. And I'm going to tell you about a game I recently played called Lands of the Mesozoic. This is a new game. It's not even out yet. I was sent a prototype from the publishing company. I think it's on Kickstarter right now, and it's going to be out, I assume, sometime next year. But this is a dinosaur tableau builder in the vein of Wingspan, designed by Ander Guinea, and it's published by Pungo Games, which is this new label within Worthington Publishing, who traditionally I think does mostly war games, but they have this new series of games, or this new label that's family focused, Euro games kind of. And so anyway, they had this I read the description of this and I was like, yeah, I'll check it out. This sounds interesting. And I don't know. I guess I like dinosaurs. Like
I do too.
Yeah, like there's something I like about
Something about it.
dinosaurs. Yeah, so that theme kind of appealed to me. So this game is 1 to 4 players, and it's definitely, again, like something that's a little lighter in the vein of something like Wingspan or Earth.
Yeah.
But you are basically building and maintaining an ecosystem with all these different dinosaurs. And on your turn, so you'll start the game with like a hand of different cards, and there are land cards, there are herbivore cards, there are carnivore cards. And you'll start the game with a couple of each. And on your turn, you can play cards into your tableau, and you have this like board that, again, reminds me of like Wingspan, because it's a big old player board where you'll be playing your cards onto. But you can play cards, assuming you can pay the cost. And then any cards that you haven't exhausted, you can kind of exhaust them, tap them, rotate them to use their abilities. So when you play land cards, the cost is just simply to discard cards. Like you might need to discard 2 cards to play this land card. And I think there are like 5 or 6 different types of lands. So you play those by paying cards into the discard pile. And then like with herbivores, which they're the second row up on your player board from the bottom, because the herbivores need the land to kind of like feed off of. So when you play those, the cost is going to be usually discarding some cards, but also you need to exhaust a type of land, a specific type of land that they need to like live in or feed off of. And then working your way up, the next row on your board is where you're going to play carnivore cards. And in order to play carnivore cards, you're going to need to usually tap herbivore cards. Like they need to kind of like feed off of those. Food chain. Yeah, there's a food chain element to it. And it's kind of hard to play carnivores because they can be a little more powerful too. So you're kind of like building up such that you can eventually get these carnivores out there. But the different cards have a variety of effects. Like you can exhaust them to trigger abilities such as drawing more cards. One of the cool things about the game is that when you draw cards, you can either draw from the top of the discard pile or the top of the draw deck. So you are thinking about when you discard cards, which you do a lot because you're paying for cards by discarding cards, which the order in which you're discarding them, you're kind of thinking about like, oh, I don't want to like throw my opponent something good maybe. Or maybe I want to discard this to the top so maybe I can eventually get it back myself. Those kind of decisions. But some of the card effects also will make your cards go extinct, like the land and the dinosaurs. So on your player board, you also have this pile where you'll keep face down cards, which you'll score at the end of the game. And the goal of this game is to have the most victory points after you play through 3 different periods. And so you get at the beginning of the game, you'll have you choose one of 2 personal, like private goal cards. And then there's one that's going to be a public, like a shared goal card that you play. So like a different shared goal every game. And these goals are like, again, it reminds me of something like Earth, I think, where...
Oh yeah, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, where you like, okay, you get 2 points per card that has this kind of cost on it, or per dinosaur that has this tag on it, different things like that. So you'll have one personal goal for yourself that nobody knows about, and then you'll have a shared goal. In addition to that, you have these race goals, which are like more like public objectives that you can score. Like if you, when you have 5 land cards in play, the first person to do that gets a 2-point token. Second person gets a 1-point token. So you're kind of like racing each other to fulfill little objectives like that. One of the things I think would have been like a little bit more interesting is if they made those goals variable, but they're kind of just like hard printed on the board. Like every game, there are these 5 things you're racing to, which I love stuff like that. Like in Terraforming Mars, where you're racing to get some kind of objectives. But after you play, you alternate taking turns. And then you, after, I think it does like a Wingspan thing, not with the actions. Actually, I'm trying to think. It does. I'll tell you, I'll explain it, and then you, like, it reminds me of the thing in Wingspan where each round you get less actions. So each period in this game, we play 3 periods. Yeah, it's the same idea, actually. You get less actions the whole time. So the first period, I think maybe you get like 7 or 8 actions that you'll do. And then the next period you get 5, and then, or maybe it goes down to 5. I don't remember, but like each period you get less actions. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And at the end of period 1 and period 2, there's a major extinction event. And that is like one of the twists to the game, because at that point, you're going to flip a major extinction card. But before that, you have to make your, you have to discard down to a certain amount of cards in your hand. You have to discard cards or make cards on your tableau extinct. So initially that could seem like, oh, well, why is I don't like that. I'm losing everything I just built up. But I think like it's kind of something you can plan around and use it to your advantage, because in order to, you only have so many slots that you can place cards, and different types of dinos want different cards. And maybe that's freeing up spaces so you can kind of rethink how you want to build up. So it's kind of like a slight reset, but you get to kind of control what's going extinct and everything. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I think people who like tableau builders, and that's why I'm like realizing like I think I'm just not like a big tableau builder person.
I'm 50-50. It really depends it depends. There's some tableau builders I love, but there's so many that I don't love that I don't think I can ever just flat out say, oh yeah, it's a tableau builder, I'm good for it.
Right. Yeah, so this is like for people who love dinosaurs, definitely check this out, because I'm going to tell you, the art is like so cool. Like there's so many cards in this game, and I have never even heard of so many of these different types of dinosaurs. So it was like really cool just like trying to pronounce the names and looking at the art on the cards and everything. And it is definitely like more of a multiplayer solitaire game. So I know some people are into that, some people are not into that. But that is one thing to consider. But definitely worth checking out if you're like someone who likes tableau builders or likes dinosaurs or likes to play games that are in that like more Wingspan kind of weight. It's called Lands of the Mesozoic, and it'll be on Kickstarter through September 2023.
Yeah, I'm interested in this just for my 4-year-old. He's in a huge dinosaur phase right now. So even if he doesn't, he knows all of the dinosaurs. So even if I can't play this game with him, just having a bunch of cards, I'm looking at the artwork right now that it does look really cool. I think just having this for him to grow into would be a lot of fun.
Totally. That's a great card, or great call, because it's the same thing like with Wingspan cards too. It's just like that's just so cool to look through all those cards and check out the birds,
learn about birds. Yeah.
And now a word from our sponsor. Legends only grow. Descent Legends of the Dark is the definitive dungeon crawling app-assisted board game experience. While playing Descent, players make decisions throughout the campaign that alter the paths their heroes walk, allowing them to grow throughout their adventures in ways unique to each playthrough. With tons of abilities spread across dozens of weapons and skills, one of Descent's most fun and iconic aspects is working together with your party to discover powerful synergies and new ways to explore and even exploit the game's robust systems. The Betrayer's War, the second act of Descent, picks up where the first act left off and introduces another full-length campaign with an expanded roster of allies and enemies. The heroes have a fresh arsenal of skills and weapons, along with new legend cards that represent permanent choices the players make to shape their heroes' growth. The second act also has even more structures, dozens of new detailed figures, and a towering and tremendous model of the sinister Dragon Lord Leverax. Let's move on to talking about Vital Lacerda.
Yes.
So I'm excited to be talking about Lacerda with you, Ryan, because you know,
me too.
Clearly you are like a big fan, and I would say definitely like I'm a fan myself too, but I'm definitely again not probably nearly as experienced with Lacerda games as you are, but I do find a lot of joy in them, and so I would kind of like, for people who aren't familiar with Vital Lacerda games, like these are like heavy thematic games.
They are very. So this is what I always say about Lacerda games, and I think a lot of people are scared of them because they are very heavy, they are very complex, they can take up to potentially 3 hours long, and there's a lot of interconnecting decisions. So the
Yeah.
heaviness really comes in like what decisions do I make? But what I also love about Lacerda games is what you're actually doing in the game is fairly simple. A lot of these are just like worker placement games, and if you know how to place a worker and take the action, so they're actually probably easier to approach than people think they are, because you get so bogged down in hearing about all this complexity, which is what I love. I love that depth. I love you have so many tight decisions, but at the end of the day, and Lacerda himself has said this. He got taught me Lisboa way back when Lisboa came out. He said
that's so
his
cool.
games are so. He said his games are so simple. He doesn't understand why people call them complicated, because it's like all you do is play a card.
Play a card.
That's it. That's it. That's all you're doing. You're just playing a card. And it's like, sure, that's like in On Mars, all you're doing is placing a worker.
Yeah.
But there's so many options, and there's always like these, bonus actions or executive actions you can take. And like that kind of complexity, it just works really well for me. I like having all these different paths to victory, all these different combos you can create, these different levers you can pull on. They just come together for me in a really satisfying way.
Yeah, and I completely agree. Like that's one of the first things I think about when I think about Lacerda games, especially like the heavier big box ones, is that like you usually don't have that many actions. You usually don't have that many rounds, but like that one or two actions just lead to like so many really fascinating brain burnery like choices. And I think, I don't know what percentage, but like majority of them, especially most of the ones coming out these days, all have the gorgeous Ian O'Toole artwork and graphic design.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
I hope that Vital is out there, counting his lucky stars every day that he got paired up with Ian O'Toole. Because these games are good, but like this partnership that Ian O'Toole and Lacerda and Eagle Griffin have.
Oh, yeah.
It's phenomenal. The production value is always out of this world. And then Ian O'Toole's covers are just iconic.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and anything he does, not just the stuff he does with Lacerda, but anything he does is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just something to say, like, we have this masterpiece of a game that now to me has been really elevated by masterpiece artwork
and graphic
on top
design.
of it, for sure. Well, and Ian O'Toole does a lot of the graphic design too. Like, he is brilliant. And so, I mean, it's just a match made in heaven for me.
Totally. And like, I think one of the things that like has, because as I look at my list, so we both picked like our favorite 4 Lacerda games.
Yep.
And I realized that like I've played, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 of these games, but there's only one Lacerda game that I've played multiple times.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I think, they're challenging to get to the table. But from the one that I have played multiple times, I can say it's so rewarding, and it feels like things like you almost have to play them multiple times so that it kind of clicks. And you can like,
you do.
Yeah. So that's kind of again, like I'm not an expert here, but like I can just tell you as an appreciator of board games and like just game design, like every one that I've played has been like really, really fascinating and cool. So it was actually quite hard to make the list, which we'll go over in a minute.
Sure. Well, it was hard for me to actually cut down to 4. So we
both had
struggles here. So we'll see how they compare.
Yeah. And one of the other things, Ryan, we were kind of talking about it earlier, is how, a lot of what Lacerda does are these like big, heavy games.
Yeah.
But there are a few games that he's done. He's partnered up with other designers to create these like what I call Lacerda-Lite games, that's
a good name.
which are kind of like really helpful for kind of introducing people to some of these mechanisms that you'll find in the bigger games. So it's like Mercado de Lisboa, This is
Yeah.
a thinky filler game that's based off of one aspect of Lisboa, and that one is co-designed by Julian Pombo, who also designed Pampero, which is a really cool game too.
I've played that one a couple times now.
Yeah. But it's like they took, the two of them took one element of one part of Lisboa and said, let's break this into a new game so people can just understand how that part of this, bigger, more complex beast of a game kind of works. And then he worked with Joa Quintela Martins to create Bot Factory. Did I do okay there?
I think so.
For Bot Factory, which is again like a kind of stripped down version of Kanban, which is like, you're gathering projects and parts and assembling these robots, but it's a like worker placement game where you have to kind of you have this factory manager that's kind of moving around and using different spaces, and causing havoc.
Yeah, it's and it's good that they've you mentioned this. They kind of took the main aspect, something that's very prevalent in those games, to focus on. And I thought Bot Factory did a really good job of kind of teaching you not just how the car mechanism in Kanban works, but actually the fact that Sandra moves from space to space and does something, which is a huge part of Kanban. They actually managed to kind of boil that down into something a lot more accessible, that when you then play Bot Factory and then go on to Kanban, you kind of already have a pretty good understanding of how that works.
Yeah, and I played a prototype. I did a play test of Bot Factory what feels like forever ago, but I actually haven't actually played the finished version, so I'm gonna have to check that out. Yeah. And then there's one coming next year, right?
Yeah, House of Fado, and I this one I have not played. I did get to see this. I went to a retreat earlier this year and got to play some of Lacerda's newer games. Cool. He was there kind of teaching, and he had House of Fado there as well. I did not get to play it because I was busy. I was playing Speakeasy, which is his new one coming out next year. So I that was a long one, so that you could play multiple games of House of Fado. But House of Fado is based on the Gallerist, so you're not bringing in artists. You're actually bringing musicians into your restaurant to perform. So again, similar mechanisms to the Gallery, similar idea of you want these famous performers to come in, but done in a small box kind of way.
Yes, totally. So I would say let's jump into our top 4 here, which I know was just incredibly challenging. But yeah, we're gonna do it anyway. And I would say let's do the thing where, we'll start with you, and if you say the title of the game, if it's on my list, we will. If it's higher on my list, we'll pivot and talk about it later.
Yeah. You can tell. Well, tell me, because the first game on my list, the number 4 for me, is Kanban EV. Did that make it on your list?
Wait, let me get to my list. Actually, it is also my number 4. So.
Okay. So I guess we can just kind of rope these together.
Yes.
But Kanban came out in 2020. Of course, this is, again, Lacerda with Ian O'Toole. Kanban EV, one of the most iconic covers. And this is actually a reprint. He did Kanban years ago, before he kind of had this Eagle Griffin style with Ian O'Toole. He had done Kanban, and then he reprinted Kanban with Kanban EV, which added in some extra elements to bring it more in line with what we expect from a Lacerda game these days. But there's so much going on in Kanban. You're effectively running a car factory, designing cars, but you have to get the blueprint for the car, you have to develop the car, you have to make the car, you have to test drive the car, you have to do all this stuff at the same time. That Sandra that I talked about in Bot Factory, she comes along in Bot Factory and kind of helps you out. In Kanban, she goes from department to department, evaluating your performance.
Judging you.
Yeah, absolutely. She's micromanaging everything you do in this factory. And so if you have not performed a specific action well enough, then she will grade you poorly and you'll lose victory points. but it's a worker placement game, and it's like a line, and Sandra moves up that line. And so there's this interesting blocking mechanism where if there's no space for Sandra in a department, she will skip it. So if you and another player can kind of, collude with each other, you can place your workers in such a way that Sandra will just skip over you, and you can breathe a sigh of relief like, okay, we have some time until she comes back around to this department now. And that is a very interesting part of that game.
Yeah, I find it to be such a puzzly, like, worker placement kind of time management system when you're like, you're kind of worried about Sandra. You're trying to like bump up your training in the different departments. Mm-hmm. And, again, I feel like we're going to say this with every game we talk about, but the production quality and the art and just the layout of the board is so cool. And it's very thematic, very well integrated, So my funny story real quick with Kanban, this is the one that I've played multiple times, by the way.
Oh, and it still ended up at 4.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Well, because I made my list based on the fact that I had a hard time like parsing which one I like best because I haven't played them all that much, but I did it based on what I'm most excited to play right now. Like, so if you were like, we're gonna play a Lacerda game tonight,
sure, that's fair.
Yeah, so I kind of did it like that. But I definitely like love Kanban EV. I played the old Kanban once before, that was actually my first time playing Lacerda, and I had a really bumpy experience because the people who were teaching it to us were really excited to show it to us, but did not remember how it worked. And so,
oh boy, that's a problem.
And I had no idea. I looked on the back of the box and I was like, oh, cars, this looks fun. I had no idea what a Lacerda game meant at that point. So
sure. I don't think anybody really did actually back then.
So it was kind of a train wreck. And then Kanban EV comes out. Eagle Griffin sent me a review copy of it. I played it and I was like, okay, I'm going to play it again because I was like writing about it. So I wanted to play it like multiple times. And like that forced me to get it to the table more. And the more I played it, the more it kind of felt not that complex to me. Like it just was clicking. So I decided one day that I was going to like have my partner Matt play and my friend Jake. I'm like, come play this game. It's so cool. It's not, it's not that bad. Trust me. But what I realized, like similar to my spice tolerance, like I have a different spice tolerance than a lot of people. And something that does not seem spicy to me, it can be very spicy to a lot of people.
Right,
so I had that moment with this game where I was like, I had played it like 3 times. So, I'm grooving with it. It's not feeling all that complex to me. And I was like, you guys should play this. And, they've played like Viticulture, Tuscany, they played worker placement games, but nothing quite this heavy, and it broke them a little bit.
Nice.
Yeah, so they're terrified, and now they are those people who every time I say like, "Hey, you want to play this game?" They go on BGG and they're like, "I don't know, the complexity rating says 3 point blah blah blah." I'm like, "Come on,
4.3."
I'm like, trust me. Like, if somebody teaches you, it's not that bad. But anyway, I love Kanban EV for like all the reasons you kind of called out. Like the whole Sandra mechanism is like really, really cool. And then when she gets to the bottom of the track, when you have those like the board meetings and everything,
the board meetings and the scoring opportunities,
super cool.
Well, and I'm really lucky in that I actually have a group of friends, my closest friends that I game with, all are huge Lacerda fans. So I'm lucky in that. And we introduced Emily. Emily is one of the co-hosts on Man vs. Meeple. If you haven't seen her stuff, she's fantastic. Loves heavy games, and so she had never played Kanban. So we were like, you've got to. So we introduced her to Kanban. And it was one of those situations where it had been probably a year since we had played, so we're like fumbling through the rules a little because it's like they're so complicated.
Yeah.
But she ended up beating us, and we loved it so much. And we're like, we have to play this again while it's still fresh. So we actually played it like the next day.
That's awesome.
Again, and she crushed us again the second day in a row. And now it's like one of her favorite. Oh, she got it. That's
she got cool. It. That's awesome.
Emily gets heavy games, and so she crushed it actually. And it's one of her favorite games now. So I'm always a fan of playing Kanban EV.
Yeah. And I think also, again, like if you're able to like learn a game like this, a Lacerda game, and then play it, within a week and keep it fresh. like keep it in rotation, it'll be even more rewarding and like not feel as complex. Like it will just grok it better.
For sure, because you just get into the motions and you kind of understand it. Yeah, sometimes it takes the play. You mentioned this earlier, and it does. Sometimes it takes the play to kind of grasp it, and then you really want to play it again. So if you have a group like I'm lucky enough to have that's willing to play these Lacerda games multiple times, we discover new things and new ideas or things that we didn't even really occur to us that we're learning 4 or 5 plays in. So it's very awesome.
And I have quite a few friends, especially in the Game Rain guys,
sure,
that are big Lacerda fans, but it's just like there's just so many games, so that makes it even more challenging sometimes to get these to the table. But I'm gonna make a better effort because I know they're just so rewarding to play. So so that is Kanban EV.
That was Kanban. Yep, Kanban EV.
So what's your number 3?
All right, so my number 3 is slightly heavier than that one. It's On Mars. Is that on your list?
That is not on my list.
All right, so then I will talk about On Mars. Again, when we're talking about our favorite Lacerda games, like Kanban and On Mars to me are so close. I like On Mars, even though I think a lot of people might put it a little bit lower because there is a lot of added complexity to On Mars. There's a lot of small little rules that you really have to remember in On Mars that if you don't remember can really mess you up. But I've played it enough times now that it flows very easily. And I absolutely love the theme. I love space games. Cool. I love the idea of being out there. But what I really love about On Mars, and have you played On Mars at all?
Yes, I have actually played it once.
so you'll might remember this. One of the main tensions of the game is that you're colonizing, or I shouldn't say that, you're building up Mars, whatever. You're building a colony on Mars, and your supplies are all being delivered to a space station that's in the orbit. And there's a rocket that goes back and forth from the surface of Mars back to the space station. And so you have to go to the space station and you have to stock up on as many resources as you possibly can. And this includes getting blueprints for buildings, getting resources, getting some upgrades to your technology. And then you have to go back down to Mars and then try to spend it all. The key thing here is that shuttle takes time to go back and forth. And there's only one shuttle. So you could end up stuck on Mars with no resources and nothing to do. Or you could end up stuck up on the space station. You've spent all your money or whatever. You've got nothing left to spend. Not money, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You've spent everything. And then you've got nothing left to do up there. And then you're just stuck there waiting for the rocket ship to take you back to Mars. So this whole timing of when do you leave the surface, when do you come back to the surface, it's very strategic. And that tension, it's really neat. It's just a really neat decision you have to make every time. Do I go with this rocket or do I wait for the next one? And the next one could be 3 or 4 turns away before it actually reaches you.
Yeah, I remember really enjoying On Mars. And I think, maybe I felt some of that extra complexity because I was just I have a couple people that I know that were playing this regularly, every week on TTS or something, and I maybe at the time was playing something where I was just it's so complicated. I would dread kind of teaching this game. I thought it was
sure.
Yeah, it's super cool though. And I because so many people love it so much, it makes me want to I'm going to revisit it at some point. But I was also curious, have you played the cooperative expansion for it yet?
I haven't yet. I have it. It's just one of those things, it's just been sitting there. I haven't had time to play it because like you said, it's always a lot of call to the new here and getting back on Mars to the table. And it almost always feels like every time we play on Mars, we always have one new person at the table that's learning it. And so I was well, let's not introduce anything crazy for their first game. Right. And so it always ends up happening that we just don't introduce it. But I'm dying to play. It's interesting. There's aliens involved with it. It's very different. On Mars is a pure hardcore sci-fi game, and then you've got these aliens coming. But I am really interested in playing the cooperative expansion.
Yeah, me too. My friend Tim, who often playtests with Vital, and so he is a big fan of these games, and he was saying On Mars is maybe not like his favorite of all the Lacerda games, but he really likes it a lot more with the co-op expansion.
Yeah.
So
Oh, really? I really want to try that. And it's
yeah.
obviously not my number one either. So, but it did get a place in the top 4. A big part of that is theme. Again, Tool did a fantastic box cover, fantastic artwork on the game board. All the components are super nice, and it feels, when you make it work, when you get into the flow of On Mars of like, you're building these buildings, producing these resources, using these resources to buy things, to build more buildings, whatever.
Yeah.
Like you can get into the zone, and it really feels good when you're in that sweet spot.
Cool. So my number 3 is Lisboa.
Oh, that's actually not on my list.
It's not on your list?
It's not.
I'm so surprised.
Close contender, honestly. That I did between my bottoms like On Mars, Kanban EV, and Lisboa. Those 3 are all so close to me.
Yeah.
I really have struggled deciding which one not to put on.
Well, that's okay, because now we can talk
Lisboa
about it
didn't make
anyway.
it. Yeah, we can.
So Lisboa came out in 2017. Eagle Griffin Games. This is, another like iconic box cover. The art style in this game is just like incredible and unique.
Yeah, and
but
I think this was the first one, right? Wasn't this their first Vital Tool collaboration?
Tool?
It might have been. I don't know. I put you on the spot. I didn't do the research. I'm sorry.
I actually possibly Vinhos Deluxe was.
It might have been.
Yeah,
you might be right.
But it is a little bit of an earlier one. But I feel like this is like a lot of people's favorite, and I think this was maybe the fourth Lacerda game that I played. But this one is basically about the reconstruction of Lisbon after the great earthquake of 1755, and that earthquake kind of caused a tsunami and all these fires, and it almost like completely destroyed the city. And so this is another like signature thing in a lot of Vital Lacerda games is that Vital is from Portugal, and so a lot of these like real like historical or something Portugal related is in the game. And in this one, like our whole thing is that we're trying to like rebuild the city and of course score more victory points than our opponents.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot going on. You're like collecting these different sets of rubble cubes. You're getting points from like building these shops in this grid, which is that is like one of the core things that they pulled out, this grid where you can build these shops, open these shops, and then also like build these public buildings around it to score points. That's the thing that they pulled into Mercado de Lisboa to show how that part of the board works. But like one of my favorite things about this game is that it is card driven by multi-use cards. And I love multi-use cards. And I love like having a hand of cards and being like, ooh, what am I going to do? And like basically on your turn, you're going to play one of these cards. And you either have noble cards or you could have treasury cards. And when you're deciding which card to play, you're also deciding like how you want to play it. So you can play it either onto the main game board, which I think is called like the Royal Court, or you can tuck it in your player board or on your portfolio. And depending on the type of card you're tucking, if it's a treasury card, you'll tuck it in the bottom part of your player board. And then you'll get money based on like what the treasury level is. Another cool thing about the game, there's this like treasury that kind of the value shifts, and there are a lot of things in the games where you're making money or spending money based on that rate or that value, and you're also players are manipulating that value. So I love like kind of market manipulation mechanisms.
Yeah.
And then also like I think that it's like it's really cool. Like again, like this is what you were talking about earlier, like simple game, right?
Right.
Play a card on your turn. That's all.
Easy.
That's all you're doing. But like when you play a card on the main board, you're taking one of these 3 major actions depending on which noble is on the card. And there are ways you can get these little tokens, these little, I forget what they're called, but they let you, if you have a token, let's say I take the green noble action, and you have a green token, you can do a follow action. There are also like all sorts of minor actions. There's so much going on. Like you can the top part of your board, you're tucking these ships, which you're using to sell goods and make money. And then the shops that are on the board, you're trying to produce goods. And you're just like really developing this city. And then there's the whole like the clergy kind of part of it. It's just it's so interwoven beautifully.
Right. That complexity of like all that interconnectivity. But again, you mentioned earlier too, like this being like Portugal and this being something that Vital is passionate about. It really comes through in the theme, and the theme of like cleaning up and like rebuilding Lisboa, like that makes the game so much easier to grasp, because like you have this full understanding thematically of like what you're doing and like how you're moving the game forward. I think that was brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. So Lisboa is, I would say, because I don't want to spoil the rest of my list, but I will say this is one of the Lacerda games that I played, and I was like, oh, I need to play this again. Yeah. I'm like, that was so cool. And of course, I haven't played it again yet, but I will.
It sounds like we need a Lacerda day too.
I know, and I have the people who are into it, and so it's just so many games to play, but I'm gonna make it happen. I'm gonna make it happen, especially with my recent Gaia Project addiction.
Yeah,
can't do them all, but I do want to like get back to this one and explore it more, and that is Lisboa. So we're on your number 2.
My number 2, yeah, and this is kind of crazy because I'll say I cheated a little bit. This one is not actually out yet, but it's delivering very soon. This is Inventions: Evolution of Ideas. This was the one that he ran on Kickstarter earlier this year. The reason I added this to this list is because we got it. We were lucky enough to get an early copy. I mentioned earlier we went to that retreat and Vital was there teaching Inventions, so I got to learn from him. And then I got to take it back, and I've played it with everybody because I really, really like what Inventions is doing. I really like the theme of this game, and if you've not seen this at all, it's about inventing things, and it's about each player playing a civilization, but it's not a civilization game at all. It embraces this concept of sharing ideas out with the world, of being a civilization that develops technologies, and you get points actually for kind of sharing those technologies out with people.
That's cool.
This idea of like presenting these new technologies to the world. And so there's this, I mean, again, one of the most beautiful designs I've ever seen from Tool. If you look at the board, it's like an old school map of the world, and you're kind of moving your pieces around to these different areas. And these are your citizens of your civilization going out into the world to spread your ideas. And there's this multi-step process to getting an idea out into the world, where one person like comes up with an idea and puts it out to the world and says, I've got this idea, and plays a card down. And then another player can come on and actually flip that card over and actually invent the idea for the world.
That's cool.
And then another player can come on and kind of like evolve that idea or augment that idea. And then finally somebody can come and actually share it. So there's this sense of cooperation with different players where you're like, I'm going to put out this really juicy idea card because I want you to come and flip it. Or maybe sometimes you say, I'm going to put out this juicy card. I don't want anyone to come because I want to both present this idea and flip this idea, which you can do. Of course, you're trying to collect these ideas and you have this whole area where all your collected ideas go that you can use to take extra actions. But what's really beautiful about this game, and we're going to have a whole video of it up on our Man vs. Meeple channel next week.
Cool.
The thing that makes it really shine is this idea of chaining that he's come up with. And in a lot of his games, you get to take like executive actions. You can take a main action and then an executive action. Well, you have these chains, and you can earn up to 3 chains based on how high you are on a specific reputation track. And those are the chain tokens you use to take actions. And so when you're taking an action, it might at some point say you can spend a chain if you've got one and then go take a second action. So you can chain up to like maybe 3 or 4 actions in a round. And so there's this whole blocking element of if you've taken an action, you can't take that action again, or you can't take the action that it's even paired with. So a large part of the game, you're going to be looking and saying, I really need to take that action, but I already blocked myself. I have these chain tokens. what series of actions do I need to chain together to eventually get to take that action? And you're taking actions based on some cards that are out. You're taking some actions based on some bonus tiles that are out, or you can advance your civilization to a new era and get some bonus actions and use those chains. And so a lot of the game is working backwards, saying, I know I want to do this thing, but how do I get there? Not to mention that as you're doing these actions, you're collecting all these tiles, these little hex tiles that come onto your civilization board and give you all these like asymmetric powers that only you're going to have. So you're really building out
so
this
cool.
unique civilization. It is. I mean, it's so much fun. And normally I don't like to talk about games that aren't out yet, but I've played this game so many times this year alone since we got it, because I can't stop. Every time I play, I want to try out some new strategies and some new ideas
cool.
because yeah, it's beautiful. Like you take one look at this game board and you're just going to absolutely fall in love with it. And again, Tool just did a phenomenal job here.
And what's it called again?
It's Inventions, Evolution of Ideas. So it was on Kickstarter earlier this year, had a huge following on Kickstarter, and it's going to be delivering sometime soon. I think maybe the end of this year into early next year.
Awesome. Wow. I'm really excited to try that one. It sounds super cool.
I will gladly play it with you. If I go to BGG Con, I'll bring mine because I think everybody's going to want to try it.
Yeah,
I'm fine playing this one multiple times. Like some games, like you said with Lacerda, like once you play it and kind of it brings back all the rules, you want to hit it up as many times as you can. This is one I could probably play every day in a weekend, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Let's play it 3 times. That's how much I really enjoy it.
Awesome. Okay, I'm hyped for that. So my number 2 game is actually a game. So I had one Lacerda game on my shelf of opportunity that I have never played. And since I do have some friends who are big Lacerda fans, I hit up one of them. My friend Tim came over just last night so that I could play this game in preparation for our conversation. And that game is CO2 Second Chance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. CO2. That's an old school Lacerda.
Yeah. It is. Well, it's from 2018 because, the original one, I guess.
Oh, yeah. The original
one is from 2012. But CO2 Second Chance, I bought it had to be over a year ago. And it was just like sitting around. And I would every time I went to go sell games or cull games, I was like, I want to try that. And this one is published by geochicks.it and Stronghold Games. And it plays with 1 to 4 players. And I have it as number 2 because it really impressed me. And it's again, my list is based on what am I most excited to get to the table if I could play something right now, and I want to revisit this really bad already. So we played, so basically each player in this game is a CEO of an energy company, and you're responding to government requests for new green power plants. And you're trying to stop the increase of pollution while also kind of meeting the rising demand for sustainable energy. What a cool theme, number 1. Yeah. What a cool theme. And this game can be played cooperatively, or you can play it like the semi-co-op mode. So which is competitive, but I've only played this once last night. And we played it cooperatively because Tim was saying he's played this a bunch. And he was saying he thought it was best at 2 for the co-op mode. So we got together, we played it. I set it up the night before we had played. And, I already was like, this game seems so cool because I love the components. I love the colors, the look of the board and everything. I was already excited. One of the cool things about it too, before I even go into what you're doing in the game really, but is the player board is awesome. The player board has everything you need to know really. And then it has these 2 bookmark cards that you slot on the left side and on the right side that align with the different actions you're taking. And it explains how to take your actions. Again, this is Lacerda. So this game has 3 actions, 3 main actions. And then you have these 3 executive actions that you can do. And that kind of reminded me of the, in the coin games, those side options you can do on your turn. I forget
Like,
what it's
yeah.
called offhand.
I forget what they're called too,
Yeah.
but yes.
But like, so basically each turn you're going to pick a major action, and then you can do each of the 3 executive actions one time each, if you would like to. And they're things that are going to just like kind of help you be more efficient. But like the main 3 actions, you can propose, like there are how many different types of energy sources? Like there's solar. I think there were 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been, man, I need to get that
Solar,
one back. The more you talk
recycling.
about it,
Yeah, solar,
I think it's
recycling.
5.
Yeah, I think there are 5 of these. And the 3 major actions is, one thing is you can make a proposal, and the board is like circular, and it's basically kind of looking at the world. So you're making a proposal for like to build a solar plant in North America or something like that, or to build a recycling plant in Africa. And your one thing you could do is put one of these proposals out. And when you do that, depending on where you put it, you're able to get some resources maybe, or you're able to get a new scientist or move one of your scientists. So you have these little workers that will help you do this stuff you're doing and help you gain knowledge. That is the other thing. There are tracks for each of the different types of plants. And as you propose and move your scientists off of these different types of proposals, you are gaining knowledge in that specific area, which is going to help you with some of these public objective tokens that you're trying to fulfill. And the second action, besides doing the proposal, is you can build infrastructure. And then the third action is you actually build the plant. And the whole tactile experience of building your infrastructure. So every player has their own little color infrastructure pieces that slide into these like U-shaped, these U-shaped proposals. And just because I build infrastructure on one plant proposal doesn't mean that whoever I'm playing with can't actually build the plant. So there's a whole thing of deciding who's doing what. And ultimately, in the cooperative mode, you have a goal, right? So we had these 10 cards, these like UN objective cards. We had 10 of these face up, like they're 5 from 2 different decks. And we have to, by the end of 4 decades, starting in 2010, we have to complete 7 of these in a 2-player game. So we have to do what we need to do to complete 7 of these. In addition to that, we also have 2 secret goal cards, and we have to both be fulfilling one of our goal cards by the end of the game, which I love that. Like, I love that little bit of tension of not knowing what Tim was going for, and like, but being like, okay, like, you know, we're both trying to like solve this puzzle and win this game, but like we also both need to fulfill our objectives. I don't know what his objective is. I know what my 2 are, so I'm trying to do that, but we're trying to do so many different things. Yeah. It's like, it's so hard and puzzly, and it's like, it's all centered around these 3 actions. And then for the like executive actions you can play a card. So you start a hand with these like lobbyist cards. So you can play a card if it connects to the action you did. Like, oh, I just built an infrastructure in Africa. Cool. Now I can trigger this card and make some money, because money and resources are very tight in this game. You have money, and you have these white like technology cubes, but then you also have these chunky purple discs that are CEPs, carbon emission permits. So there are some of them in each region around this, you know, again, circular board here. But then we each start with 2. And there's a whole thing where there's a market in the center of the board, because I love market manipulation, where you can as a one of your executive actions, you can interact with this market. You can either buy a CEP, and once 2 CEPs are gone, like we clear the market there, the price goes up. The value goes up. So then like I could do that. I could buy the last one, make the price go up. So then Tim on his turn, if he needs money, he can sell one of his and now get more money, you know, money back at the higher rate. So you're playing around with this market manipulation. And the other thing is, at each round, At the end of the round, after we take in a 2-player game, we each took 4 actions. Then you get to a phase where you get income, and then there's pollution you need to deal with. So anywhere you did not, I'm trying to think if there are 6 major areas around the board, but anywhere where you were not able to build a power plant, you're going to have to flip one of these these pollution tokens, which are going to have either a 20, a 30, or a 40. And that is going to increase this pollution track, which you then need to spend victory points to push back. And if you ever get to a point where you go below 0 victory points, you lose the game. So you're managing this pollution and you're trying to build these plants. And then the other thing is you have these summits where you can move your scientists to speak at these different summits and share what they've learned and learn more from each other. So that's one of the ways you're working up these tracks, which you need to be up these tracks at certain levels to build the plants of a certain level. And then you also have these tokens that get randomly placed at the beginning of the game. You have tokens in 3 different categories. One is basically how you're building plants on the board. For example, we had 2 tokens that came out that were South America. So we were okay, we need to get infrastructure. I think it's infrastructure, or either infrastructure or actual plants. We have to do more in South America this game.
Right.
Because if you don't achieve these fast, you lose points every round, and it gets incrementally more expensive. So the first round, for any tokens you haven't flipped because you haven't achieved those goals, you lose 1 point. In round 2, you lose 2 points per one you haven't flipped. So we're racing to do that. We're trying to get our objectives. We're also thinking about our personal objectives. It was just so amazing. Again, from a game that has very simple 3 main actions that are so clear.
Right, again, that's
and
there's
a
Lacerda thing.
Yeah. So it was just it was so fascinating, and it was so great to play with Tim because he's played it so many times, and you know that that's just a great feeling to play a co-op game, especially a heavy one.
Right, and that's the thing is that co-op mechanic. It turned that game on its side. The original version didn't have that co-op mechanic.
Oh, so I didn't know that.
That was introduced with CO2, the second chance. And everybody, I would never want to play any other way.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to play cooperatively, but man, the cooperative is so good. I can't imagine not playing it cooperatively.
Yeah. I'm going to try it. I'm going to try the semi-co-op just to see. But I agree, for me, and that's why it's so high on my list, because I'm I don't know if I've ever I'm trying to think if it just felt so different. I love the theme. You feel the pressure of the theme. We're trying to better the world, and it's just so puzzling. You have to work together. Work together. And again, graphic design, art, components, so good.
Always.
Yeah, so I was just we barely made it, but we pulled it together at the end, and it was just so satisfying, and I can't wait to play this game again. That's where I'm at. CO2 second chance. And and I think this is just a lesser talked about Lacerda game too, because it's not necessarily one of the big box.
Well,
Eagle
it's not.
Griffin
It's
ones.
not Eagle Griff, right? It's not Eagle Griffin one, and those kind of do take the conversation.
Yeah. So you like this one too?
I do. Yeah. It was lower. I like the cooperative part of that game. I need to play. I've only played it once, the cooperative, and I played the cooperative game one time, and I really liked it. It was a long time ago. So if I played it more recently, it might be higher on my list.
Yeah.
But my top 4 are kind of hard to beat. Right? So,
yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was CO2 second chance. So what's your number 1, Ryan?
So my number 1, I'd be curious to see if this was your number 1 or if this ended up on your list or if you even thought about this, but it's Weather Machine. That is my number 1 Lacerda game. I absolutely love Weather Machine. Not only is it my favorite Lacerda, it is one of my top 10 games of all time.
Wow. I've not played it, by the way. I've not played it yet.
Okay. Well, if you had, it might be up there. This game, it's so good. There's so much, again, it's there's so much complexity happening here, like you have in the Lacerda game. But it's this, this Weather Machine. It's actually a really cool premise. This guy, Lative, which is Vital spelled backwards, he made this Weather Machine, and it kind of went out of control. And instead of like fixing all the climate problems in the world, it exacerbated them and caused all these natural disasters. So that machine is running right now, and it's just destroying everything. So your job is to come in and try to repair this weather machine by building prototypes, by kind of running these experiments and getting the weather under control. So there's this whole element of coming to this location to kind of run these experiments. There's this whole element of like fighting the weather. And then also in like what I would consider the biggest scam in history, Latif got the government involved and they're funding his ability to fix the own disaster that he caused. So he's getting paid to fix the disaster. But there's this whole government section where they're trying to work with it as well. So you can come to the government to get upgrades, and they're going to be trying to help you fight this inclement weather. And while you're doing all this, you're like studying and researching, and you're gaining like knowledge in these different areas, and you're publishing papers based on these different climates. So like you're studying, you know, heavy heat climate, or you're studying the wet climate or the snowy climate, and you're putting these books down on a little player board, and you're trying to collect these sets effectively that let you publish a paper. And if you publish a paper, and like it's a cool little research thing happening here that some people have said isn't as thematic, but like for me, I find that enjoyable. I like this idea of like, we're studying the weather, we're trying to build our own weather machine, we're trying to place these, you know, it's a worker placement game, but you're placing these little robots out to like actually do certain things in spaces. And again, it's very cool. And this is something that I love that Lacerda did. And he did the same thing with Inventions. Every action you go to, and you mentioned this earlier with like looking at your player board, everything you can possibly do in a location is spelled out from there. And each area that you go to has 2 actions you can take. And some of the action spots let you do one or the other, and some let you do potentially both. And doing both actions is really good, but you have to be able to afford them. You have to have some of the different currencies in the game in order to spend those currencies, or vouchers as they call them, in order to take these actions. And a lot like Kanban, Latif himself is moving along these locations, but he doesn't punish you. He actually helps you by giving you extra research when you get to his spaces. And so there's a whole blocking element. Players can block spots, and that means you can't go there. And also, it's one of those games where you have to keep moving your worker around. You get one worker, so you can never just like go back to the same spot. You're always working. You're always trying to push things forward, and you're trying to take actions that you don't necessarily want to take, because you kind of have to do everything, but there's a whole timing aspect. And if you get that timing aspect down, it goes really well for you. And you only get income like once Latif moves from every action space back to his office. So there's a part in the game when everybody's getting really low on income and we're like running out of everything. And it's like, please just push him along, because like in Kanban, if he can't go to a space, he skips it. And so you can kind of like try to speed him back, and you're trying to like tell the other players at the table. So there is this level of cooperation too. When it comes to like running these experiments, you're going and you're collecting these gears, and there you can get these cool little like metal gear upgrades, and you're placing these gears down, you're placing these bots down, trying to run these inventions. But if an invention doesn't have enough robots to run, it fails, and that's bad. So you're over there like talking to the players, like, are you going to go here? Are you going to put a robot here? Like, if you go put a robot here, I'll put a robot right beneath it. We can run this, and everybody that runs it gets points. So you really want it to go off, and so there's this. It's not really a negotiation game at all, but you do kind of have to count on other players like helping you do some of these actions. Trying to do them on your own can take a lot of time, a lot of resources, and a lot of actions. Even like fighting the weather, everybody that comes and helps you fight the weather gets points as well. So you want people to come and help you fight, but they might not want to do that. So yeah, there's just a lot that goes into that.
Wow, that sounds so cool too. And I know, like, I've seen Weather Machine out. I just haven't gotten around to playing it yet. And it looks, of course, it looks gorgeous.
Well,
but that sounds
the board
really cool.
is phenomenal. Everything is phenomenal. As much as I love Inventions, the way that Inventions look, the Weather Machine board, I think is Tool's greatest work. And actually, if you flip it over to the backside, it actually has the just the artwork that Tool did for the game without any of the icons or graphic design. Like it, and I almost want to like hang that on my wall. It looks so good.
Get a second copy for that.
Right. So yeah, that's that Weather Machine again. Another one that I would play. It's just at the drop of a hat.
Yeah,
always.
I'm very like I'm more eager to try this one now, especially as you, someone who's played so many Lacerda games and a lot more than I have like, and you're so
Sure.
excited about it. Like, I'm like, I want to try that. I want to try that.
Yeah.
So again, my list was based on, thinking about like, I was kind of surprised that I've only played almost all these games just one time, but
Yeah.
I guess it makes sense. It makes sense. But the game that I have number one right now is the game that if I was going to play a Lacerda game tonight, this is the one I would pick. And it was the first one that I kind of like really fell in love with. Cause like I said, I played that Kanban, one of the old versions of Kanban, and it was like very bumpy. So I didn't really get it. And then I played Vinhos, the deluxe edition. Yeah, this is going to be a shocker for people because I know not many people would say like Vinhos is their favorite Vital Lacerda game. But for me, I just love it, and kind of just looking back at it to kind of, remind myself of how certain things worked a little bit for this episode. I was like, I want to play this. It looks so cool. And I instantly started remembering back in 2019 when I played this game. And the other thing that's really significant about this was the first game, like the first heavy game that I taught to people on my own. Because I remember I was like nervous. I was like, I want to, like, I made myself a little like teaching guide. So I explained things in a like methodical order and everything. Because I was like, this is my first time. Like, we're all new players. Because usually, like, at that point, I was like maybe a year into the hobby. So I was mostly like learning games from other people, especially if it was like a heavy game. So anyway, I got Vinhos Deluxe Edition. It originally came out in 2010 from What's Your Game. And then Eagle Griffin put out the Deluxe Edition in 2016, which it has a double-sided map. I have only played the 2016 version, so I haven't played what most people find to be the best version, the version with the cool bang.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I haven't even played that yet, and I love this game.
You should, though.
I know. I will. I might revisit it with 2016 just to like refamiliarize myself, and then try to do it like within the same week with the 2010 side of the board.
Yeah.
But this plays with 1 to 4 players, and I love like wine as a theme. Like, so that's part of the hook for this game for me. In Vinhos, you are basically a winemaker and you're running your own wine business in Portugal. Again, we're in Portugal, which is really cool. Over 6 years or game rounds, you're going to be like establishing estates in different regions of Portugal. And then you can buy vineyards and you can build wineries. And then you'll be producing or trying to produce the highest quality wine you can. And you can hire helpers like enologists and farmers that can help you make better wine. And then you're going to try to like sell your wine to local establishments for money or ship it abroad to kind of increase your brand's or your label's like reputation. Another cool thing about this game is that you play 6 years, and I think after the 3rd, 5th, and 6th year, there's a fair where you're going to be able to like submit your wine for a competition, and you have these 3 different, I think it was 3 different like wine judges or magnates who are going to be like judging your wine on the smell, the taste, all these things, and it's so thematic, and it's like very like you're dealing with all aspects of running the business. Like I used to like, I still love viticulture with Tuscany. Like, it's a fun game. I love wine themes. And then this game like kind of like exploded my brain with like in terms of like the business aspects of running a wine company. Each round you have like a couple different phases. So there's like a weather forecast, and the weather's going to impact the quality of your wine you're producing. You get 2 actions. Everybody gets 2 actions. And in the center of the board, this board is beautiful, by the way. Again, tool. And in the center of the board, there's this like 3x3 grid of action options, action spaces. And there's a whole thing with the way it's not worker placement, but it's more like action selection. And when you move your worker, if you move to an adjacent action in this grid, you don't have to pay anything extra. But if you move further away, you have to pay. I think the currency is bagos in this game,
Yeah,
but
right.
like you have to spend money. I forget if you have to pay players at all, but then there's also like where the round tracker is, you're kind of being taxed by the game. So there's some, interesting choices when it comes to like which actions you're going to need to take versus what you want to pay maybe an additional cost for, or you can afford. But then your wines are going to age and you produce wine. And then again, you have this whole fair. Again, the theme is like, as much as I love like Kanban EV, I love wine as a theme. Like this just excites me more.
Cars are cars, but wine is wine. Yeah.
So like this thematically just excites me more. And I'm just like blown away with how thematic everything is, but how also like strategically like deep and complex it is as you're managing all these things and trying to make the quality of your wine better, and you're taking it to these tournaments.
It's good.
My friend Richard and I, ever since we played this game, we were just like, let's play some Vinhos. Let's play Vinhos. I swear, if I had $1 for every time Richard and I have said that to each other, let's play some Vinhos again. And we just still haven't. So I need to fix that. Because I know he would be down at, like, if I was like, Richard, come over right now, Vinhos, he would be super down. I have other Lacerda fans who would be like down. I need to break this one out again because, I don't know. It's just the one after thinking like I'm excited to revisit Lisboa as well. I also at some point would love to play the Gallerist again because I had kind of a
that was
I was wondering why that wasn't
well, that was the first one. That was the one that I think where Tool and Lacerda first connected was that was my first Lacerda game was Gallerist. I love it. I just don't love it more than my top 4.
Gotcha.
So it's hard to
I have to like I love the theme of the Gallerist, but like when I learned it, I don't think I got it or something. It seemed like it's almost like some of the things you're doing are so simple, like you're not. I don't know. There was something that was like amiss, and I feel like I should love that game, so I definitely want to revisit that.
I think you will once you kind of get it. Yeah.
Yeah. For sure. So that was the other one, but like as of right now, I'm super excited to play CO2 Second Chance again, and I'm like. Vinhos, I want to revisit that. I want to revisit Lisboa.
Well, if I come to BGG, I'll bring Inventions, and you can try that one too.
I would love that. I would love that. And now I want to play Weather Machine too. So
yeah, right. Oh yeah, Weather Machine too. I have both of them, so
I'm dialed
we'll
back
see.
in.
We'll see what we can work out.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm dialed back in, but like, these. Well, Vital is awesome. He's also a sweetheart of a person. Like it was so.
Oh, he's the nicest guy.
I got to meet him at Essen last year, and that was just it was a highlight of the show for me because he gave me a big old hug and was happy to see me too, and like so it was But I'm just in awe by his designs, in terms of like how thematic. How the theme always ties to the mechanisms, and you have these like simple kind of actions that just like branch into this craziness.
Yeah. That's what he's known for, and it all comes together. Like if it didn't come together, this would be a different story for him. But they do. They really, all of the games have complexity that really feels good once you've kind of figured it out and know how to manipulate the game, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you picked this to talk about.
Me too.
This is Vital is a great first designer spotlight for the BGG podcast.
One of the most iconic designers. So yeah, for sure.
So well, thanks again, Ryan. I hope I catch you at BGG Con and PAX Unplugged.
I hope you do too.
And we can play a Lacerda game together.
Yep.
You've been listening to the Board Game Geek podcast, produced and edited by Candice Harris. Special thanks to Matt Fonda for editing and mixing our music. Be sure to visit us on the web at boardgamegeek.com. You can also find us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitch under Board Game Geek. You can reach us by email at podcast@boardgamegeek.com. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming!